I'm not entirely sure where the idea came from. I'd always wanted to write police procedural story, or as Clark and Collins are, a non-procedural police story, because they don't follow the traditional line of inquiry. So I wanted something that was different. I wanted two characters, male characters, who were really close friends. I actually think that the pair love each other, but in a totally platonic way. And I wanted to build a friendship between the two main characters. And that's as much as I thought about before I started to write. I knew that Collins was going to be young. I knew that he was going to be a trainee police officer when the story starts. And I knew that Clark was going to be his mentor, his friend, his guide, as the story developed. So that was about as much as I knew about the story. And their characters, their personalities developed as I wrote the book.
How much of the characters are based on people you know or your own personal experience? I mean, Clark, for instance, is a very interesting character in that he's got a VC, that he's a war hero, a very modest war hero, and he's got this incredible knack for getting on with all kinds of people.
And duffing them up as well.
And duffing them up as well, but we'll come to that later.
Yeah, Clark was a gift to me as a writer, because I wasn't going to have a character called Clive Clark. I was going to have a character called Tony Brown. Now, Tony Brown played for West Bromwich Albion, and he was never in any trouble. He was a wonderful player. He has all of the records, scoring records for the Albion. But when I sat down to write the introduction, the first chapter in the book, I have Collins in with the superintendent, and then he presses the intercom and says to Sergeant Ridley, "Send in." And as I was writing, I didn't write Tony Brown, I wrote Clive Clark. And then after that, it was really physical description of Clive Clark that came out. And then as far as his character is portrayed, he is, in my view, typical of a certain type of black country person. There was a story my brother told me once, when he was working in a factory, and a fight broke out between a 6'4" bully and a 5'0" labourer. And the 5'0" labourer threw this 6'4" man across the room, smashed him onto the production line, and knocked him out. And afterwards, down the pub, when we were having a chat, my brother asked him, "Where did that come from?" And he said, "Oh, I was with the Chindits for 3 years in Burma during the war." And the idea of a small man with great fighting ability, courage, tenacity, good sense of humour, and a great pride in the black country, just rolled out. It was just there, and it was there from the moment I wrote the name Clive Clark.
Some of the reviewers have actually referred to the level of violence in the book. I mean, there is quite a lot of violence in it, and it's quite a lot in Summer '65. Do you think the books are glorifying violence?
No, I don't. I think what I portray is what violence actually does. I'm always slightly irritated when I see people being kicked in the face on the television, and they get up as if nothing had happened and there's no bones broken, and they beat the hell out of their attacker. That doesn't happen in real life. One good punch usually ends a fight, and I've seen that often enough to know it's true. And therefore what I've described, because I have done a fair amount of martial arts in my time, is what actually happens when you hit somebody. It is true, as I say in winter, that if somebody's knee is straight and you stamp on it, you only need 14 pounds of pressure to break the person's kneecap. If you hit somebody under the nose with the heel of your hand hard enough, and you know what you're doing, you can send splinters of the skull into the brain and kill them. So these are facts, and I've used those in the book. If you read the book, you'll see that the violence is often, yes, there's a fair amount of violence, but it's usually very quick and it's over quite quickly. And what's described is realistic rather than glamorized version of what you often see as violence on the TV or in films. Right. Well, I think it's because I was born in 1952, so I was only 7 when the 60s started, but they are the decade in which I reached puberty, in which I grew up, I left school, I got the first job. It was a period of real opportunity for someone such as myself, and it was one of a great positiveness, much more so than any decade I've lived in since. And people, for some reason, they like the 60s, even those who didn't live in the 60s, like the 60s, they find it interesting. And I wanted to explore some of its attitudes. I'll look at homosexuality, which had only just been legalised in 67. That didn't make life that much easier for homosexuals. They were still being beaten up regularly. They still found themselves being ostracised by society. There was still a great deal of fear from the general population and misunderstanding about homosexuals from the general population. And I wanted to show that in the books. And one of the things is, in a longish series, you can chart to some extent how those attitudes change. The 60s and the 20s, 1920s, 1960s, were the two great decades of the 20th century in my view. And if I'm also honest, they were pre-computers, they were pre-DNA, it was old-fashioned police work, it was who you knew, it was how you dealt with people that enabled police officers to discover who the villains were, and that just seems more traditional, more interesting to me than using DNA. Well, hopefully you are going to see more of Agnes. Agnes is actually in my opinion, the least developed of the 3 characters, but a number of people have really identified with her and liked the character.
In some ways, she's the most sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean, she is a Quaker. She's obviously highly intelligent. She is a mixture of people who I read about who served at Bletchley. I say read about them. For some time now I've been keeping obituaries from the Times, and the number of women who have had their obituaries written, she came out of, is an amalgam of those people. But what I'm planning to do with Agnes is, yes, she will continue to help Collins and Clark with their work, but what I'm hoping to do is have some standalone novels of Agnes. The first one I've planned out, it's set in 1942 in Birmingham again, and it's about her trying to uncover a sympathetic Nazi cell in the Midlands. Autumn is, I've written 64,000 words of Autumn, but about 14,000 words ago I decided to kill off all the main suspects, which hasn't proved very successful. So I'm going through now, reading what I've written, and I will change certain things in it. But that's an interesting story. It's quite a complicated story, and it's about corruption in Birmingham during the 60s. Now, as far as I'm aware, Birmingham did not suffer greatly from huge levels of corruption at any time in its history. But there were plenty of cities that did. Newcastle being a prime example. But this one will involve councillors, police officers, the IRA, who were around in 1968, and MPs as well. So it's difficult to write. It's going to be quite a long book, over 100,000 words, but I am enjoying it. It's Collins. Collins is me, or what I would like to be.
Even though he's not a Baggies supporter?
Even though he's not a Baggies supporter, yeah. But I think Clark is the most entertaining character I've created. Mm-hmm. But I think Collins, he maintains, what's the word I want? He maintains the essential decency.
He's a balance.
He's a balance, yeah. He's a balancing factor character as well. And I think as the books progress, different sides to his character comes out. One area which I haven't fully explored or explained, and I may do in some later books, is his relationship with his father, which is a strained one at the moment. So that might be interesting to explore a bit later on.
What rank do you think he reached when he retired from the police?
Well, I think he's going to run into difficulties once he gets to inspector level, because he's not one of the lads. He's not going to join the local local Masonic lodge. It's something I've been toying with. 1976, 77 at the very latest would be the year that Clark would have to retire as a police officer. And I'm left thinking, do they both retire and set up as private detectives, which is a definite possibility. But I don't know yet.
Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing the next episode.
Thank you very much.